Hello everyone, how y'all doing? Welcome to another PS's book reviews. Today I'm gonna talk to you about this book, Confissão de Lucio, in English, Lucio's Confession. It is translated, so you can look it up. It's by Mário de Sá-Carneiro. It's a Portuguese poet slash writer that lived in late 1800s. Also in the beginning of 19. I think this book was published originally in 1913 or 1914, somewhere thereabout. It was an author that died very young, and this became a bit of a classic because he was friends with a very famous Portuguese poet, Fernando Pessoa, who lived around the same period, and they had this famous compilation of writings and essays called Orfeu at the time, which was a bit controversial because it was very critical of the high class in Portugal, who were the main book consumers. So a bit of a controversy at the time, and this book is considered very well praised by Fernando Pessoa himself as well, and Mário de Sá-Carneiro considered a genius by him. So it got a lot of projection out of that, despite the author having died quite young. I think he was around 25 when he died, and the book itself is the story of a person who is confessing to a crime that he swears that he did not commit, but he was convicted for, and he served the time for. And he says that he just didn't respond to it in court because he didn't have the energy to fight it all, but he swears that he's innocent. And it's a very interesting story of a poet living in Paris, but also traveling to Lisbon a few times. And I did hate that part because it felt a bit like writers writing about writers. Yeah, sure, you should write about what you know, but I mean, it gets a bit cliche. I don't know. It feels like people could have more imagination than that and writing about the process of writing and the problem of writing and how hard it is. It just gets a bit boring for me. But in this case, it worked. It's a bit of the story of this poet who lived in Paris and had a few groups of friends that he would meet, and the different currents of events, sculpturing, the performative arts, and all these different people that he would meet were artists, and were all feeling a bit maybe insecure is the right word, or extravagant, trying to be extravagant. So I guess in a way, this story is also a critic of the artists of the time, who felt like they had to be that they wouldn't let the art speak for itself. It was more about the artist and the artist being eccentric than actually the art being good and speaking for itself. So it's a bit of a critic on that, but then it goes on into its own story. And from this point on, it's going to be spoiler alert. So if you don't like spoilers, this is the time where you should stop the video and just go check out the book because it's good. So, moving on with the spoilers, it's a story about this person who becomes the poet, as we already mentioned, becomes very good friends with another writer, and they spend quite a lot of times in Paris. And at some point, the other writer moves to Lisbon, and our original poet misses him a lot, and starts to wonder what happened to him, and they have these weird conversations as well as he was in Paris. And then when he went to Lisbon in search of him, they became reacquainted, and he realized that he was married now, but never quite understanding why he was married or how he met his wife. He liked his wife a lot. She was felt like an extension of the original friend, and he ended up being more friends with the wife. And there were a lot of soirees that they would have with other friends, discussing all sort of things. And as time moved on, it seemed like the that wife of the writer was a lot into him and not hiding it from anyone, which was a bit of a shocker to him. The whole thing becomes a bit hallucinated. You start understanding that there's some sort of thing going on. Either is schizophrenia from the Lucio, from the confessor, or from the other characters. You don't quite understand what's happening there. In the end, it becomes clear that he sort of hallucinated, or at least that was my interpretation. He sort of hallucinated, and to avoid appearing to be in an homosexual relationship with another writer, he started to hallucinate these female wife that the other writer had, which apparently didn't really exist. And there's this whole a bit of a tension drama between the whole thing and the unraveling of the story as we go along. It's a very interesting story, not just because of the way that the story was told, but of a lot of small things that are mentioned. Things like I really enjoyed as the narrator narrates his confession. He suddenly did not remember things, but he starts remembering things. Now that I think more about it, I think we really did it like this. Small details like that really makes you feel like it is a person explaining to you something that he kind of forgot or repressed in some way. So you do feel a bit of that mental illness vibe coming off the writing. But at the same time, it's very well written. It has a lot of expensive words, which were just, the words that were used at the time, we're not very used to it. And nowadays, I don't know how they translate that very well into English, but in Portuguese, they had a lot of words that were not really used nowadays, but it was still quite readable and understandable in current Portuguese, just using these words that we don't really use anymore, but they were quite common, and you can sort of understand what they mean from the context that they are placed in. But I was surprisingly well written for a person who supposedly he was a son of rich parents, and whenever he went to university, he would just live the bourgeois life of bon vivant, and drink, do drugs, attend prostitutes, that kind of stuff, attend soirees, and party more than actually learn. But apparently, he didn't know how to write very well, which was strange that he ended up getting so deviated and dying at a young age. It's a very strange story of both the author and the parallel that you can tell to the author, to the character of the book itself. So there's a lot of clear things that seem to be like autobiographic in some way, which was interesting. I didn't know the author Mário de Sá-Carneiro himself, so for me it's all a discovery. I just know the things that I read from his Wikipedia page. The book is very well rated on Goodreads, 4.14 stars. I'm seeing it here on the screen. So I highly recommend you checking it out. And it's also very small. It's not that hard read. So I think it's going to be interesting. It also covers some themes, not just homosexuality, as we mentioned. More than homosexuality, feels like it goes a bit more into gender fluidity and loving other people and transforming into another kind of character, which for me, when I was reading, I was thinking, oh, okay, so it's going for the transsexual kind of thing, or a person that switches sexes or cross dresses in some way. But and then I started thinking, well, this was written over 100 years ago. 100 years ago, transsexuality wasn't as accepted as it is nowadays, even though there's a lot of discrimination still nowadays. I think 100 years ago it was like seen as a complete abomination, and although people existed that already felt like they were the other sex than the one they were born with, I'm sure that existed already. It's a bit more accepted nowadays, and accepted not just to be open about it, but also write about it and that kind of stuff. So this one felt like he was hiding something like that, but in the end, it just felt like it was repressed homosexuality that he kind of was so badly accepted in his mind that he started to distort reality to fit the thing better. Which, if you think deep down about it, that means that he was more homophobic he would rather go crazy than go homophobic, than go homosexual, or to accept, embrace that his homosexuality. So for him, he was not homosexual. He liked women. Just the other guy started to appear like a woman to him, on some way or shape. Anyways, very interesting read. I highly recommend it. Mário de Sá-Carneiro, Lucio's Confession. That's all I have to say for this video. Let me know what you think on the comments below. If you already read it, if you didn't read it, if you can recommend me any other stuff, similar, different, whatever you can think of, please drop on the comment box below. I'm always happy to read comments, and I do read every comment. So see you next time. Bye bye, everyone. Take care.